All right. And we are live.
All right.
All right. What's going on, Facebook and everybody? Thanks for joining us today. Um, my name's Chris Beck. I'm the owner of Beck Law Office LLC. I'm here with Brian Hunter, the owner of 937 Payroll. And our goal for today
Sir.
is to try to explain some of the things that this $2.2 trillion that the stimulus package that the Senate and the House have approved and the president has signed. And so we want to try to tell you how this can impact you, your family, your business, and some things that might be available to you, and some things that we've learned as far as reviewing this. Brian, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah. How's everybody doing there on Facebook? My name is Brian Hunter again, and I am the owner, president, founder of 937 Payroll. I've been in this industry for about 12 years and started 937 Payroll in May of 17. And who we are is a company that focuses on human capital management. So that's payroll, time and attendance, HR services, and helps small businesses, primarily locally here in Dayton, but really all across the country. And what we focus on is bringing the best possible customer service to our clients while utilizing national payroll processors as our back of the house. So we are the largest partner of EDP on a wholesale basis in the state of Ohio. And I've been working with EDP pretty much for the last 12 years of my career in this industry.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us with this today. I think we both admit that this is fairly new to us as far as using StreamYard and what we can do. But I know myself, and I know you have as well, but we've spent a lot of hours in the past couple of days trying to advise clients on kind of what all is going on with these stimulus bills. And I know I've got the bills here. There are two stimulus bills, mainly this House Bill 6201 and 748, which I've printed out, reviewed over the weekend, and tried to keep myself up and going. So it does look like our StreamYard comments are working. Judy just said hi to us. Hi, Judy.
Hey, Judy.
So we're going to go ahead and jump right in, if that's okay.
Yep. Anybody has any questions as we're going through, please feel free to reach out and comment. We'll just stop in the middle of our conversation and take any questions that there might be. We kind of have a agenda of some of the stuff that we're going to be going through, and then we'll try to show some supporting information online, show you guys where you can find that on your own and use your own time to kind of review each piece, because there's a ton of information. We are barely going to scratch the surface on everything today. But really, we just want to give some people some broad strokes on what the new bill is saying, and how it's going to affect individual business owners.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you have a question, drop it in our comments on either the 937 Payroll page on Facebook or the Beck Law Office page. And our little shameless plug, go ahead and give us all likes and
So, Mike,
see what we're going. So let's jump right in. Let's start with, so we're going to kind of do this as a communication between Brian and I, and hopefully that we get all the points that we need to get. So we were going to start with the expansion of the Family Medical Leave Act. Brian, what's your take on all that?
well, I think that the important thing to know about the expansion piece of it is that it takes effect after the first 10 days, and the 10 days started April 1st. So I think a lot of employers are thinking, well, all of this has really started, back say March 13th, March 15th. Why haven't we been able to take advantage of any of the paid sick or the expansion? And it's just has not yet taken effect. It doesn't take effect until April 1st. So from that point on is really kind of when all of this is going to go into effect. Chris, do you want to go through kind of the details of what it brings out?
Yeah, so the way it used to be was that it was only for certain size employers. In this new bill, Bill 6201, actually changed that to fewer than 500 employees. And so what it did was it expanded the Family Medical Leave Act to include some people that were not, some employers that were not otherwise bound by FMLA. And so it's what Brian mentioned was this this first 10 days. So part of the kind of two separate parts of this is there's going to be, starting April 1, there's going to be 10 days of paid leave. And so an employee has a right to get paid for 10 days of sick pay. And we're going to go through kind of the limits for that, because there are per day limits and aggregate limits on these as well.
Right. And Chris, I think it's important to note that the sick pay is 80 hours at any point from April 1st through December 31st of this year, right? The first 10 days of this act is just unpaid altogether. So if you don't fall within that sick pay, you have to take personal time off if you're not working, or company sick pay if your company has a sick pay policy, but it is essentially 10 unpaid days. So the sick pay rules, which we'll go over here in a minute, pertains if you yourself have COVID-19 or taking care of somebody who has that, you've been instructed to be quarantined. It's not necessarily just, hey, for the first 10 days of this, after April 1st, everybody starts to get paid.
Right. And so what it is there's actually another provision that we'll go over that actually bridges the gap that of that 10 days that will make that 10 days kind of paid. So FMLA is one part of it where that first 10 days is unpaid, but then there's a gap bridge there to be able to cover that. And so the big thing that I find with the FMLA is right now in Ohio, because I believe everything's been shut down, I don't know of any schools that are still going. It covers if you have been diagnosed with COVID-19, you have a family member been diagnosed with COVID-19, or also symptoms of those things where a doctor has put you off. But it also covers if you have children of school age, so tender years, that their daycares and all of that have not been, they're not open, not able to have it, then you would qualify for FMLA. So that's what's big expansion.
Or if you can't find somebody else to take care of your kids for you.
Right. You have to take reasonable means, but I mean, to me, I'm thinking this FMLA is pretty much going to apply to anybody with kids.
Yeah. How are they going to be able to prove that?
Right. And it's going to be pretty liberally granted. Now, we will caveat everything we say, because right now we've read the bills, we've done the research, but a lot of this is saying, hey, how is this going to play out in the future? And we don't know the answer to that. We have a good idea of how it plays out, but it's going to be up to the legislative branch. And as far as the powers that be, like the Secretary of Labor, the IRS, and even the courts, probably, to determine whether or not these apply or not. So we also have a question from Joel, as far as many people have seen the Mark Cuban interview talking about payroll and overhead loans and the forgiveness. We're going to give you some detail on that, Joel. So if you stick with us for a minute, we're going to get to that as well, as far as the forgiveness of those loans, because that's going to be a big part of this. So with regards to that FMLA, so there are kind of the limits of as far as what can be paid. Brian, you want to cover after that 10 days of unpaid, how much is an employee going to get if they are under one of those conditions that FMLA is going to cover?
They're going to get 2/3 of their pay, which I think is what a lot of people are wondering is, so how are we going to calculate 2/3 in the payroll system? Are we just plugging in a 2/3 of their salary as a salary amount, or is that we're going to plug in the full wages and then the system's going to calculate out 2/3 of the pay? So, we definitely recommend you get a hold of your payroll provider to figure out how they're going to take care of that. But so it's up to 12 weeks of job protected leave for 2/3 of their pay. You say that's right, Chris?
Yeah, 2/3 of the pay, not to exceed $200 per day, and $10,000 total for any one employee. So the employee can get up to $200 a day of their pay, and up to $10,000 total, depending on the number of days they're out. Now, keep in mind, FMLA only applies so long as those conditions currently exist. So in the event we reopen, which I hope is sooner rather than later for all of our sanity, that when schools—
Do you want to show my screen here, Chris?
Yep. But I'm going to take a second. Eric Mata, he's the one that turned me on to. I just want to give him a shout out because he's the one that kind of taught me how to use StreamYard, and it turned me on to all that. Told me what microphone to buy and everything. So we appreciate that. So I'm going to share Brian's website screen here. So
Okay.
you can show that. So you want to walk us through what you got going there?
Yeah, I just wanted to point this out. If anybody wants to see some of this information after you're here on watching us on Facebook Live, if you go to the 937payroll.com blog, there's a section on here that refers to COVID-19 Small Business Resource Center. Within the Small Business Resource Center is this whole resource that has been developed by ADP. For those of you who aren't familiar with ADP, they're the largest payroll provider in the country. They pay one of every 5 employees in the U.S. And in here is a section on the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which talks about the expanded leave. So this is kind of all the stuff that we're talking about right now. First 10 days may be unpaid. Here's the 2/3 of regular rate of pay, and then up to maximum of $200 per day. So this is a good resource to kind of break out all these different sections.
Okay. And so that's on your website. What's the website address?
Yeah, so you can go to 937payroll.com and then go to our blog. And then in there, you'll be able to see the COVID-19 Small Business Resource Center.
Okay. We received a question from Kate wanting to know about whether this is FMLA is only for full-time employees. My reading of it is no, but in order to calculate everything, it's based on the average number of hours worked as far as how that pay works and all of that. So Kate, I believe if you're a part-time employee, then that should still apply to you. It looks at kind of the number of weeks in a 20 calendar week and how that all plays. And so you should qualify if you're a part-time employee. We also received a comment from Jennifer, who said that apparently in the 2 o'clock, what they've now been calling the wine with the wine, has kind of gone to the schools are going to close until May 1st. So all of us that are now homeschooling our kids, we're going to be doing that till at least May 1. And so I know I wish all the parents the best of luck with that. Anything else that you want to cover as far as the FMLA goes, Brian?
Just again, that it doesn't take effect until April 1st. And it's not for the stay-at-home order, the best that I can read it as. So I think that there's some people out there who are thinking, well, it's stay home and we are not an essential business. So I don't know that the sick leave specifically doesn't pertain to the stay-at-home order. Now the extended expansion does, the 2/3 of the pay past the initial 10 days, but the sick leave portion, the stay-at-home order does not apply to that sick leave.
Right. Sugar Run Transportation, will it cover older adults who are high risk to work? The answer is not. It doesn't cover just because of a person's age, but it will cover if you have a doctor's note that says you are in that protected class for this. So I do know that I received a call from a client earlier in the week that is currently pregnant. And so their doctor gave them a note that says, due to the COVID-19 risk, they were being put off work. And so it does kind of cover that as well. So I hope that answers that question.
So Carolyn wants to know if employee that was full-time and hours have dropped below with regards to COVID-19. Carolyn, is your question in regards to how much you have to pay them due to the PHEL expanded act, or is it in regards to how much they're going to get on unemployment? Can you clarify that for us? And we'll come back to that.
Yeah, and in my kind of reading into the question would be that this is a snapshot as of April 1. So it kind of depends now. There may be some unemployment coverage that we'll talk about that would cover some of that offset as well. So if you want to, Caroline, if you want to kind of ask the question again or give us a little bit more detail, we'd be happy to answer that. So our next bullet point is to jump into unemployment compensation. I did a video about a week and a couple days ago about mainly focused on the restaurant industry as far as the unemployment goes. Um, so the way I read this was that Ohio, so unemployment is a state-run group. It's a benefit from the states. So the federal government can assist, but it's up to the individual states to pass. Now the federal government is kind of giving guidelines for some things because the federal government is part of this bill is giving money to the states to help offset some cost. And so what they have done was they did away with the waiting period for purpose of unemployment, and then they also added those same things for the FMLA. So if you are, because of a health issue, unable to work, if your company has been shut down because it's a restaurant or something, and you've been listed as a non-essential business, and so you've been shut down by governor order, then you would qualify potentially immediately to start receiving unemployment compensation. And then there's also some things that the federal government's putting out there for some additional funds on top of the unemployment compensation. I'll pass that one over to you, Brian.
Yeah, so in addition to your regular 50% within the state of Ohio, which is normally 26 weeks, they're also going to be giving an additional $600 on top of that, which I know has a lot of employers who have been reading up on that scared because they're saying, hey, my employees are going to potentially make more money on unemployment than if they were employed working for me. And so what's going to incentivize them to come off of unemployment? And what I have to say to them is that's a very valid concern and one that I'm sure we're all going to have to be addressing if and when that actually does come to fruition. But for now, the important thing to know is that normally unemployment is 26 weeks and 50% of their pay, but it's an additional 13 weeks now, so it's 39 weeks total. And then the additional $600 per week on top of their 50%. So we've calculated the break even out at about $60,000 in Ohio. So if you make $60,000 a year, 150% of your unemployment for 1 week is about $600. So they add another 600 to that, you're basically making 100% of what you would be making if you were employed. So anybody making less than $60,000 a year is essentially making more on unemployment than if they weren't unemployed. And when the Senate was asked as to why they decided to do that and have some people be paid more than while they're unemployed than if they're employed, their response to that was that it would be too complicated to get every single state to change their unemployment requirements from 50% to 100%. So the easiest way that they could implement this and just get money out to the American people was to tack on an additional $600 on top of that.
Right.
Also, I think it's important to note that self-employed individuals and gig workers are also now covered by unemployment, whereas previously they were not covered by that. How that unemployment is going to be calculated is still to be determined, but the wording is that the benefit amounts will be calculated based on previous income using a formula from the Disaster Unemployment Assistance Program. That formula is the part that we don't really know what that's going to be. My assumption would be that the formula for self-employed individuals would somehow consist of their 1040 and the Schedule C, profit or loss to their business that they filed in the past. And if they are a newly self-employed individual, then if they've had work sometime within the prior 20 weeks, then their prior employers may actually cover a portion of your unemployment.
Yeah. And so we got a couple more questions. Seth, you ask, can a full-time college student and 1099 people get unemployment? You would have to actually be able to work. So I don't believe a full-time college student who does not work would be eligible to draw unemployment. Now, if the college student is full-time but works part-time, or full-time and works full-time, then they could still apply for unemployment because they have relaxed the requirements for seek work. Now, I will caveat all of this as this only applies so long as we're considered still in a state of emergency for purposes of this shutdown because of the COVID-19. Once this goes away, there's going to be a taper off of the unemployment that is going to be available because people will be expected at that point to go seek work or go back to their employment, hopefully sooner rather than later.
And then in Seth's question about the 1099 people getting unemployment, I think that's a yes. I mean, that goes back to the self-employed and gig workers. Those are all a lot of times considered independent contractors. So they are going to be able to get unemployment. One thing that you didn't necessarily ask in your question, Seth, but anybody who is a dependent of somebody else is not going to necessarily be able to get all the benefits that people who are not dependents are. So that's definitely going to be a stipulation as well. I think as I said that out loud, that's more in terms of the refund checks that people are going to be getting. Dependents aren't going to get those, but they're definitely kind of in a different class.
Correct. And then as far as self-employed, Judy asked about LLC business owners who don't draw a paycheck. Yes, you can still get unemployment compensation as long as you're claiming those draws and you have it as a taxable income. So you should still be fine to be able to qualify. So a lot of salon owners, restaurant owners and stuff like that have still been able to do some unemployment. There was actually some push today that they're still working on to try to have the business interruption insurance that a lot of it does not cover viruses. They're going to try to legislatively make it to where that you may get coverage from that as well. But we'll have to stay tuned because that's not even been drafted yet.
Right.
As far as your question,
sorry.
as far as the getting a master's but can work, it kind of goes based on whether you're working at the time of all this going down. So if you're not working but you could have worked, you would not qualify for unemployment, is my take. You'd actually have to be employed to draw unemployment.
Yep.
And so 20-week working time, the 20 work hours, is that still required for unemployment? I do not believe so. That's actually been reduced. So obviously the amount you would get would be less because it's based on a work history, an expected number of hours worked. So
is that something that you've read? Because I haven't seen that. Clients have been asking me that. Is the 20 weeks to apply? And everywhere that I've seen in Ohio, it does.
No, it looked to me from the state of Ohio, at least, it looks like that's been relaxed.
Okay.
But
that's good. It has.
Yeah. So a business, but I was still covered as a dependent. Again, I think we answered that part of it. Is if you are covered as a dependent, it all goes back onto who claims you on the taxes. So hopefully that answers that question. So kind of went a little out of order because we started covering this before, but we wanted to talk about the paid sick time. And so what this bill did pass was that for those 10 days that we said you don't get paid under FMLA, so you have to have those 10 days of unpaid leave, you actually now can get paid sick time. So you're entitled to paid sick time for 10 days. And that's based at a $511 per day and an aggregate of $5,110 if you're a full-time employee, and $200 a day and $2,000 aggregate if you're a part-time employee. So that's what you may be entitled to. Now, I found from a legal side, the important part of this, again, as of April 1, is the employer cannot require you to take your earned paid time off. So whether you get sick time, vacation time, or just general PTO time, the employer cannot require you to use that time before you get to those 10 days. You get those 10 days up front as far as that goes. Is that your understanding, Brian?
Yeah, if you decide to use that sick pay, then they can do that. But yeah, they can't force you to take your regular sick pay, your regular PTO, if you are sick yourself due to COVID-19 or you're taking care of somebody else who is sick. That's the entire point of the sick pay leave. The other thing to mention is that if you're taking care of somebody else, you don't get 100% of your pay. You get 2/3 of your pay and not 100%. And so the one thing that I've thought of, I'm not sure, I haven't seen any articles directly addressing this, but my question would be, maybe you know this, Chris, is what happens if somebody else in your family gets sick? You're taking care of them, you get that 2/3 pay. And then because of that, you yourself get sick. And now you need time off for your own. Do you get to essentially double dip? It's not really double dipping, but do you get to take both of those, or is it one or the other? How is that going to play out?
Yeah, so you'd still be limited to the total number of weeks for that purpose. So the total FMLA leave, as far as that goes, again, the 10 days of paid starts April 1. And so I think it's as occurred would be the test. So as it comes up, you'd be able to get that 10 days of paid leave. Um, I actually think from a legal side, it's one of the interesting, if there's an employer, I heard of one this week over the weekend that was laying a bunch of people off that may qualify for that 10 days or not even, or terminating them outright. There may be some arguments to be made. When I did a lot more employment litigation, um, there's some public policy arguments that can be made, and so I think that'd be up in the air for this to be determined.
I do too. I mean, because I could see, okay, it starts April 1st, and let's say during the month of April, your spouse, my wife gets sick, and so I'm taking care of her. I get paid 2/3 of that during April, and then fast forward to July. Now I've got it, and I've got to take off work because I'm sick, and now I want my full pay. I definitely think there's going to be a legal argument that both of those apply, because in no place have I read that it's one instead of the other. I can see that it's this or that, but nowhere does it say if you take one, you can't take the other.
Correct, correct. I
I
agree.
don't.
I think you can aggregate it as long as you don't go past the 10 days. Um, so, Judy, you asked a question about loans. As far as that goes, um, we're going to talk about a little bit more about the loans, but you can actually get loans to cover the draws that you would have otherwise taken a lot of, as far as that goes, because it would kind of be considered salary for you, where you may get a tax credit. So I think we'll cover that a little bit more. And if you don't do that, it depends on how you're paying yourself a large part of that. So hopefully we answer that for you. And if not, let us know. Um, so, Kim, your question is great. You asked about the ability for the Secretary of Labor to exempt um, smaller businesses under 50 employees. You're correct that the way it is written is that the Secretary of Labor can grant an exemption for that person, so for that business. The one thing we don't know is in that bill, it says that if it would jeopardize the viability of the business. What does that mean? Um, I was talking to a business client earlier today, and the question came up of, well, what does that mean? What does viability mean? How does it impact it? And it kind of goes towards what I'd call the reasonable person standard of, if you could pay, but it'd be hard, but it would cut into if it didn't take you too far into the red, would that qualify? I think it's going to be a case by case determination, because we don't really have the guidance from the Secretary of Labor as far as how they're going to say whether you get the exemption or you don't get the exemption and how that's going to be applied. I think they'll try to be reasonable. A business that's taken that doesn't have a lot of cash assets would probably be okay, but until we know kind of and see how this trickles down, we don't know. Lori, as far as your question about a worker who was told to go home, but then brought back recalled the following week, I believe, yes, they can apply to try to get back pay reimbursement for unemployment for that 1 week. So I definitely, but for my take on the unemployment is, hey, if you think you can get it, apply. What's the worst thing to do? Say no. And at least you have the case number open and all that. So if they get laid off again, you can reactivate that case and hopefully go.
I think it's important for everybody to know who is filing for unemployment too, that you have to claim every single week, every single Sunday. A lot of people who haven't been on unemployment before don't realize that. Also, make sure that you're helping your employers out, or if you're an employer yourself, you're advising your employees to file under the mass layoff number. The mass layoff number will get those unemployment claims filed to, it's called the mutual fund instead of the employer's account. And that is a fund that's funded by the state of Ohio and the federal government, and won't ding or penalize you as an employer and make your rate skyrocket. So anytime you can, have your employee use that mass layoff number, which is in the 937 payroll blog if you need it. And if they don't do it, don't stress about it, because Ohio Unemployment has given guidance that they're pretty much treating any layoffs right now as a result of COVID-19, and not really having to ding you for that. But if you can get them to put that number on there, that's just going to make it easier, because there won't have to be an audit done on your account. There won't have to be any cleanup that's done.
Yeah.
To get
Yeah. So for employers, that's important, because this does not affect your unemployment compensation rating if they use that code. And what I'm seeing with layoffs is I'm telling my clients, for the business clients, is to put that number on there, so they, on that letter, the
share my
layoff letter,
screen.
says what they have. Share the screen.
Yep.
And so
there's
here
the
on Brian's,
instructions. There's the instructions for everybody. So it's 4 steps, and that's the mass layoff number that everybody needs right there.
Yeah.
Make sure it's applied.
Yep. Perfect. All right. So we were going to go then onto tax credits for the employer. So of all of our business clients or our business people that are out there watching and listening, we wanted to let you know about kind of some things that are coming out of the stimulus bill for you. If you pay for that sick time under the 2-week requirement and additional other, if you maintain your employer, so the legislators want to encourage people to keep their employees and keep paying them, you're actually going to be eligible for a payroll tax credit to not exceed $10,000, up to 50% of that payroll costs from your taxes. So this is going to greatly lower your taxable burden on this stuff, and this includes some of those draws as well, I believe, depending on how you pay yourself as an employer. Anything you want to add on that, Brian?
Yeah, I would just mention that there's a couple of different tax credits that are out there right now. One is the tax credit in regards to the original coronavirus relief that has to do with the paid sick leave. Then there's also a new one in the CARES Act that got passed last week. That's the employee retention payroll tax credit. So it's important to realize that you may be getting multiple tax credits. The sick leave tax credit and the employee retention payroll tax credit are pretty much going to be happening the same way. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the sick one is 100% of the pay up to $10,000, and then the employee retention payroll tax credit is 50% of the qualified wages, also up to $10,000 a person. So depending on what type of tax credit you're going to get a different portion of that credited back to you, but they're both going to be credited against employer Social Security taxes, and then any liabilities above and beyond the employer Social Security taxes that you owe are going to be given back as a reimbursement or refund back to the employer. We expect most of those refunds to be done through the 941 on a quarterly basis, but they've also given some guidance that there's going to be a method to get a more expedited refund or reimbursement. The process of requesting that expedited refund has yet to be determined. I have not seen anything on that. I think that's something that they're working on right now, so kind of stay tuned for that. But if you want to, let's see. If you want to pull up my screen here, this is the one on the employee retention credit right here. So again, 50% of qualified wages, up to $10,000. And then eligible employers are employers who are carrying on a trade or business during 2020 and for which the operation of that business is fully or partially suspended due to orders from an appropriate government authority limiting commerce, travel, or group meetings, or employers who have gross receipts that are less than 50% of the gross receipts from the same quarter in the prior year are also eligible. So basically, if your first quarter of 2020 is less than 50% of revenue for the first quarter of 2019, then you could be eligible for the employee retention payroll tax credit. Or if you're a business like a restaurant, daycare, who has been ordered to close, then you would also just automatically be eligible. And then if you do take advantage of the employee retention payroll tax credit, you're eligible when you're under 50%. And then you stop being eligible when your gross receipts are more than 80% of that same calendar quarter in the prior year. So there's kind of a trigger to make you eligible, and then also a separate trigger that makes you stop being eligible as well. And then there's different rules if you have more than 100 employees or fewer than 100 employees. So it's important to read up on those things.
All right. And so the next line item on our agenda is the loans. We've been hearing a lot about these loans and done a lot of digging as far as all this goes. And so for our business people, you're eligible to, well, you can apply for a loan. And so part of to help pay payroll costs, rent, mortgage, certain liabilities that you have to continue operating business and to be able to keep paying your employees. And so you can take out those loans. And now the government did kind of set a cap at the interest on that, up to is a max of 4%. Their hope is to try to avoid some of this predatory lending that may occur when times get tough. So you would do that through your own bank. You do not have to go through the SBA or through any certain bank, but the government is working with the banks to get these loans up and running. And so they did away with a lot of things for these loans. One being, a lot of times if you take out a business loan, they would make you sign a personal guarantee. So that's saying if Beck Law Office takes out a loan for $50,000, that I would have to sign personally to say, hey, as a sole proprietor or as an LLC, that I'm saying, okay, if the business can't pay it back, they can come back on me. And so the government did away with that personal guarantee provision. So there's no longer a guarantee that it has to be signed for that. So that's a big thing, because that allows you to protect your personal assets from your business assets a lot more on a legal side and financial side. Kind of the big thing on this one is people wanted to know what they keep hearing this about these loans being able to be forgiven. Yes. So what the bill itself actually says is that it says the loan, the business shall be eligible to apply for loan forgiveness. Now, to me, shall is one of the most strict words in the legal language, but then it says eligible. So you're eligible, but it doesn't say whether or not it's guaranteed. So we would warn any business that is going to take these loans that we don't know what their criteria is going to be for deciding whether these get forgiven. Now, I would also warn on these loans. So if they do forgive it, so you take out, say, $10,000 for the loans and at 4% interest or something like that, without doing the math too much, and you get the $10,000 forgiven, you would still be responsible for the interest payments. And so you would only get the principal amount forgiven. And then what would happen is if $10,000 is forgiven by the government, then, or by the lender, then you would have to claim that as income on your taxes. So you're going to show a taxable income of $10,000 for that event that you're going to then have to pay tax on. Anything you want to add on that, Brian?
Yeah, I want to speak specifically about the Paycheck Protection Program, which was part of the CARES Act last week, if you want to share my screen on that. So the Paycheck Protection Program is a loan that businesses are going to be able to apply for, just like you said, Chris, that has no collateral, and it is a forgivable loan. The way that they are determining how much money is being loaned for the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, is 250% of the average monthly payroll expenses. So a small business is eligible to borrow 250% of their average monthly payroll expenses up to $10 million. The amount is intended to cover 8 weeks of payroll expenses and any additional amounts for making payments towards debt obligations, so prior payrolls. So this 8-week period can be applied for the period of February 15th through June 30th of 2020. So it's a short period of time. It doesn't go through the end of the year like a lot of the other programs that are going on. And as far as how you can apply for the Paycheck Protection Program, these are being done through SBA banks. So there are certain banks in Dayton, I know Huntington Bank and US Bank are both SBA approved banks. I'm sure there's others out there as well. I also would recommend getting in touch with the Small Business Development Center. There's one here in the Entrepreneur Center where our business is based, and there's a different SBDC, Small Business Development Center, in each county in Ohio. You can also work with the Springboro Chamber of Commerce. They work with the Warren County SBDC. But the banks are right now basically waiting wording from the SBA in DC to tell them how businesses comply for these Paycheck Protection Program loans. There's really no avenue today as we speak on how to actually go about getting these loans. So I know on the US Bank website, there's like kind of a question, like a form, lead form that you can fill out that says, yes, I'm interested in getting this loan. And then somebody will reach back out to you when they have that available. But at the moment, it's not available. And then as far as who's eligible for these loans, so again, it's kind of like everything else. If you have less than 500 employees, you're eligible. If your business is in an industry that is like a restaurant, hotel, falls within food service, NAICS classification, then you're automatically eligible. And then, so it's basically, if you have less than 500 employees, you're eligible. If you are over 500 employees and you fall within one of those industries, then you're eligible as well. So I think most businesses listening to this right now are probably just automatically eligible for this. And then, independent contractors, gig economy workers are also eligible for this. Sole proprietors, independent contractors, and let's see. And this will be forgivable probably in some form of payroll proof given back. So it's at the end of the 8-week period, borrowers will work with lenders to verify covered expenses and the proper amount of forgiveness. So essentially, if I have figured out that my 250% of payroll is $50,000, but I only used $30,000 of it to actually cover payroll during that 8-week period, because I have less employees working for me at this time, then only 30 grand of that is going to be forgivable. You have to pay interest on the other 20, or basically pay that back, the principal, like you were saying before, Chris.
And there's no prepayment penalties built into any of this as well. So that's kind of a good sign. We had a question as far as from Sugar Run Transportation. So if you laid off your employees and you were able to rehire them because of getting things up and back and running, yes, you can still qualify for the employee retention tax credit. It just would be prorated from the date forward that you rehired those people back, is my reading of it.
Yeah, during that time period, you'd be able to take advantage of. So if you didn't have any employees working for you from February 15th to March 30th, then you couldn't use it for that period, so your period would just get shortened.
So Judy also asked about is the forgiveness guaranteed? No, it is not guaranteed. That is the biggest thing. It says you're eligible. There is interest. You are going to be responsible for the interest no matter what. Even if it is forgiven, you're going to be responsible for the interest. It also can cover, if you cover health insurance for your employees, that is a covered expense as well. So that's a big part of it. This does exempt certain businesses, and a big part of this will be whether you're shut down for one of those covered reasons. Because if you're like we are, I mean, lawyers are considered essential business, so we're able to continue to operate. But it would also go back to if some of your employees are, even though my business would not be covered, but my employees, because children are off of work, then that would cover them as well. So then I would still be able to do that as that kind of thing for those loans.
One thing to mention on the interest. So from what I'm reading is during that 8-week period, there is no interest on that money. So it's only if you have any money of the PPP that maintains after that 8-week period that you haven't paid back, even if it's on the initial portion. So as long as you use it within that 8-week period, then no interest, no penalty, and then the loan's forgiven. But if you
and they've left it open,
then the loan's not forgiven.
The government has left it open so that these can be extended. This was based on the end of June. Essentially, if this continues past that, my guess would be they will be expanding the time frame for all that. Jeff, you asked about is there a benefit to rehiring and paying your employees from the loans? The benefit is once the stay-home order has been lifted and you're able to go back to work, and I know that Jeff works in kind of a construction type field, that he could have his people out still installing fences and everything. The benefit would be you would be able to take out one of those loans in hopes that it'll be forgiven. And you're still going to get that I mean, you still are definitely going to get that tax credit for paying your employees anyway. So that's going to be a big deal, even if it's not forgiven.
If employers are debating between putting their employees on unemployment, not having their workers work, but being employed and paying them, then I think they might as well just leave them on unemployment, because you'd be going through this whole process of bringing them back, paying them their full wages, and then not having them do anything anyways and hoping that the loan is getting forgiven. So you might as well leave them on unemployment where they're going to get an additional $600 a week, assuming they're making less than $660,000 a year. They're going to get just as much, if not more, of what they would have gotten if they were working for you. So if you leave them on unemployment, the benefit there is that it just creates less paperwork for you. It's less of a hassle. But if you're going to have them work, then you might as well bring them back and do the PPP loan.
Judy, you asked a good question, because this is something Brian and I were debating before we went live, was that the loans versus the Paycheck Protection programs are two separate programs. That is correct. The government will not allow you to double dip. So if you get the loan forgiven, you're not going to get that credit, but there's some other parts of that you would get to be able to run off. And so
if you don't use the disaster loan for payroll purposes, then you can still use that. But if you use the PPP, also use the disaster loan for payroll.
You can't use the loaned money and get the tax roll credit is the way it works. So if that was confusing, I apologize. Hopefully that answers your question, Judy. Anything else as far as the loans go that you want to cover, Brian?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. The next thing is that we've been getting a lot of questions from individuals because they want to know about the stimulus payments that are going to be coming, hopefully coming. Well, they will be coming. It's just a question of when they'll be coming. So as many of you, we've all seen on the news and been paying attention to. So the big part of this big spending, the stimulus plan is that taxpayers are going to get up to $1,200 per tax filing adult or tax eligible adult, and $500 per dependent under the age of 16 for purposes of being able to get some money. Now, there is a cap on this, in that this only applies for individuals who are making less than $75,000, or for married filing joint of $150,000. So if a husband and wife file separately, they each would qualify as long as either of them makes over $75,000 for that $1,200, and whichever one claims the dependent on the taxes would get that extra $500 per dependent under 16. So then it's not like as if you make over 75 or over 150, it automatically goes away. It does taper off. And so there are calculators online that you can find that kind of gives you an idea. And the way this number is figured out, so what your income threshold is on line 8B, 8 as in boy, on your 1040 on your tax returns. Now it's going to use the 2019 numbers if you filed for 2019, or your 2018 numbers if you haven't filed 2019 yet, but it's an advance on your 2020 taxes. So if they give you the full amount in 2019 and you make too much in 2020, then you're going to owe some money back for that. If you don't get your full benefit because in 2019 you made over that $150,000 threshold, and in 2020 because of the economy not being as good, you don't make as much, then you would you would get the remaining credit that you didn't get on those payments in way of tax benefit on your 2020 taxes. Is that accurate, Brian?
Yeah, that is accurate. I have had some people tell me that there is a no clawback provision. So basically, if they give you too much, that they're not going to make you repay it. But you could get less. So I like to give the example of my own personal decision when talking about this, because I do think there's a lot of confusion around this. People think, well, if I haven't done my 2018 return or my 2019 return, I need to hurry up and do that so that I can maximize that amount of that check. But it is calculated on the 2020 return. So my example is, I am married. My wife and I filed jointly, and we have 3 kids, one of which was born during 2019, and I have not yet done my 2019 tax return. So I should have $2,400 for my wife and I, plus $500 a child for each one of our children, another $1,500. So I should be getting $3,900. But because I haven't done my 2019 return yet and put my daughter on that, then I'm only going to get a check for $3,400. And when I go to do my 2020 tax return and my daughter is on that, at that point, the tax return will calculate that my credit should have been $3,900, and it'll subtract out the $3,400 that I've already received and pay me an additional $500 on that. But if the opposite is true, what I've heard is there's no clawback. They won't make you take that money back. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I have heard that.
Yeah, I've heard that, but I did not see that. So I don't know that they're going to give more than I think they're going to want that money back is my take on it. But it's to be seen when we do our 2020 taxes.
Right.
Kelly asks, as an LLC sole proprietor, if she takes no salary but just as draws, can she apply for unemployment? And then the loans for operating expenses, leases, and utilities. I believe you can do both. As long as you're not currently earning money, as long as you're not receiving money.
I lost the audio
Oh.
for you.
So
it's just me. It's just me.
So Kelly, I think the answer is yes, you can still apply for unemployment. You just cannot pay yourself while you're on unemployment. So you can't be taking any draws while you're on unemployment. So I believe you can try to get both as far as that goes. Jeff asked as far as if he laid off a part of his business, but not the other part, can he do the loans and then have the non-essential people continue on unemployment? I think that would go back towards that income, the amount that you made, as far as whether or not you would be able to qualify. So I believe that's probably accurate. However, the concern is that's hoping that loan is forgiven, and if it's not forgiven, then that obviously puts everybody in a bind when you're taking out loans for people to pay stuff, hoping that it'll be forgiven, and there's no guarantee it will be forgiven. Ryan, is the audio back?
I think so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
That kind of covers the stimulus payments. I will say that it's anticipated that they should come in by the end of April. I think this is all kind of taking the IRS by storm as well. So you're going to try to get it to you as quickly as they can. Hopefully, I know they're kind of shut down as well and teleworking as far as that goes. That's kind of in the IRS's hands as far as when you're going to get that money. They did leave it open as far as whether or not they can do additional stimulus payments as well. But I think they're kind of trying to figure out now. This is kind of a stopgap measure to try to get us to hopefully the next couple weeks or months. And then they can always issue more money later. And states are still working on as far as what kind of packet they're going to do as well. I don't know that states will necessarily do a stimulus, but they might do something by way of tax credits as far as that goes. They've talked about doing away with like the Social Security tax as far as that goes and stuff like that. But none of that has actually been passed yet. So maybe we'll do another video and we learn more.
What I've been hearing is that 2.2 trillion from last week added to another 3 trillion essentially that the Federal Reserve has. So they're working with about 5 trillion right now, and hearing that they're going to add potentially another $5 trillion. So by the time all of this is over, it could be about $10 trillion that the Federal Reserve uses to dole out. So we've only seen just about half of the money that could be coming down the pipe.
Right. Sugar Run says it's bad times. It's definitely tough times, but we're going to get through this. Get back to business as normal, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
We hope everybody that's watching stays safe, healthy, and sane, and business gets back and everybody continues to do well, stay positive. I did want to cover some of the other programs that were covered in the two bills. There was some money that was released through these bills to cover additional things like WIC, which provides food supplements for mothers and children, also SNAP benefits, school lunches, and it says now that everybody is entitled to, if they need a COVID-19 test from a doctor, that will be able to be funded. Oh, he was talking about the sound quality, not the times. But sorry, we're doing the best we can with the technology we have. If anybody has any questions, certainly reach out to myself or Brian.
Absolutely.
And the picture, this is about as good as it gets as far as the two of us looking. So hopefully that.
Be for yourself.
I even shaved for this today. So so there are some additional things. So Medicaid coverage that is going to cover any uninsured health insurance expenses as far as COVID-19 related illnesses. The government has come to the table with a pretty significant amount of money to help try to avoid people going into too much medical debt. And so I don't think we need to talk about that a whole lot more, but if you have anything to add on that, Brian.
Yeah, no, I think that covers it. That's definitely your area of expertise, not mine.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that wraps up all of our bullet points that we had. If anybody has any questions, send us a message to either the 937 payroll or the Beck Law Office page, and we'd be happy to help any way that we can. You've had great comments from everybody. It's been good to see these. These have been great questions and things that we were anticipating and hoping to answer. And so we thank everybody for watching us. I thank Brian for joining me in this collaboration, and we hope everybody stays healthy, stay safe, and stay sane. And hopes that sunnier weather is ahead of us and we can get back to our booming economy that we had before this all happened. So we'll band together and get through this.
Yep. Thanks, Chris, for having me. Appreciate everybody for jumping on here. I know all this information's confusing, and one part, Chris and I are kind of talking about two different things on the loan, and that just shows you, two people who have basically been doing nothing but researching this information ever since it first came out. We still have disagreements on how this is going to play out, and getting confused amongst like which loan programs we're talking about. And that's just because this information is confusing. It's really happening in real time. Can't tell you the amount of conversations that I'm having with clients right now, calling and asking something, and then we give an answer, and like, to the best of our knowledge, based on the information we have available, this is what we think is going on. But tomorrow it could be different, and sometimes it is different the next day. So just stay tuned, stay up to date. What I want to say to everybody is, make sure that you're doing your own research and talking to multiple sources and trying to form your own action plans on your business, because it is a crazy time right now. But I really think that the programs that we have is going to provide a lot of relief, and everybody should be able to get some sort of relief or another. So thanks again, Chris, for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, everybody, thanks for following us. We'll see you guys later.
All right, take care.